Hello everyone, it's great to see you all again here on the channel. Now, lately I've been shooting quite a lot of Astro landscape panoramas, and I thought it might be a good idea to revisit this topic and give you some tips and tricks and hopefully make it a bit easier for you to get good results with your panos. So I have already made quite a few videos on this topic, and I'll reference those here so you can check them out in your spare time a bit later on. But even though the basics of panorama shooting haven't really changed all that much, there are a few things on the editing front that have. In fact, I think the editing is where most people have trouble when it comes to producing great Milky Way panoramas. So I'm going to attempt to show you a number of fairly recent panorama projects that I've captured to give you some inspiration, and then we'll have a look at some of the details on how to go about capturing these images. So I'm going to list the basic points relating to capturing Astro panoramas. And firstly, and almost the most important of all, is to have a level tripod when shooting multiple images. Because when you swing your camera around to take the next shot, it's always easier to do this quickly and efficiently if the camera doesn't have to tilt up or down too much. So a level tripod makes this so much easier. Secondly, we need to work out how much overlap we need to incorporate between each shot. I like to make this at least 50%, but sometimes even more than that. And that's because when we go to do the stitching in our Panorama software, the program will have a better chance of identifying which parts of each panel need to blend together. And another often overlooked part of the panorama puzzle is that invariably when we stitch a lot of images together, especially multi-row panoramas, we tend to lose the top and the bottom corners of the images. And I think this is due to the fact that we're trying to incorporate a three-dimensional image into a two-dimensional space. And you find that straight lines become curved, and so that a large area can be squeezed into a smaller frame and field of view. So to overcome this, we need to make sure we overshoot the edges of our panorama, top and bottom. It's a lot easier to crop the final panorama down than it is to actually add more real estate to it. Now, just on this shooting aspect, I like to keep it simple, and so I use a standard ball head on my tripod and manually do the panning and tilting of the camera. So the end result is that I won't be getting a consistent 50% overlap between my images. Some may be 45%, while others might be 60 or 70%. And you know, the reality is that it doesn't matter at all. Keeping the images all level and shooting them as quickly as possible will be the key to success, Remember, the stars are constantly moving across the sky, and we don't want to waste too much time between each of these shots. So now I want to address some of the issues we may face in editing Milky Way panoramas. Now, I do hasten to add that the definition of a panorama is more than one image joined together to attain more width or height in an image. Often we shoot panoramas because we just can't quite fit everything we want to shoot into the scene with whatever lenses that we may have. I often shoot small, perhaps 2 or 3 shot panoramas to achieve this. And these are always very easy to edit, as the software doesn't have to do much work to join them. And the other advantage to shooting more than one image is that you'll be increasing the pixel dimensions of your final image. And this makes it great for printing large files or giving you more crop room in the edit. And you'll also find that you are capturing more detail than you could ever do with a single frame. Okay, so what problems might we face when editing our panoramas? Let's get onto the computer and we can actually find out more about this. Now, I'd like to start with this image I shot at the silos about a month ago, and you saw the video on that. I've got down the bottom here a sequence of images shot as a horizontal panorama. So I've got this camera in standard sideways mode, if you like to call it that, and you can see all the images down the bottom here. So in total I have, let me see, how many have I got here? Let's just highlight those. About 8 there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, well, there's 9. And that's because I overshot a little bit on the top corner. You can see the settings I've got at the top here. f2.2, 15 seconds, 20mm focal length at ISO 3200. A few adjustments here, not a whole lot to be honest. Anyway, this first example, I'm just going to show you what Lightroom would do. So I'm in Lightroom here. If I just right click on that sequence and click on Photo Merge Panorama, let's just see what Lightroom comes up with. Well, there it is. Very twisted and warped, so that's in spherical. Let's try cylindrical. That's worse. Let's go perspective. And that's unable to merge the photos. Now, let's go back to that spherical one again. And if I try this boundary warp, let's see what that does. Yeah, it doesn't fix it. So this is an example of a sequence of images that will not stitch properly in Lightroom. So I could send this off to Photoshop, but I have a better option. So I'm going to cancel that, and I'm going to actually export these out of Lightroom as TIFF files. So let's just have a look at that. So I'm going to send them off, make that, rather than JPEG, let's make it TIFF. I'm going to go 16-bit component, no watermark, and click export, and we'll just wait and see what we get from that. So here we are. You can see what we've got. There are our TIFF files that I just created. So I'm going to open those in another software called Microsoft Image Composite Editor. Now, for those of you who are on Windows machine, this is an older piece of software, but it is actually free. That's right, free. Doesn't cost you 1 cent. The problem with this is finding it, because it's not currently supported by Microsoft, but it's out there. So let me just find these images anyway. So I want to select all of these and open them up in this software, and let's see what happens. So we'll open those. There they all are. All you do is you open the images and go along this top section here. So I just go to next, and it's aligning images and compositing the images. Now, there will be some different options here, and that's what I want to have a look at. So you can see here, that's a funny shape as well. But you can see the different options that this software gives us. And as we just go down, we can find one that we think might work for us. And in Lightroom, we only had 3 of these options. In this software, we have much more. And it's simply a matter of finding the one that works best for what we're trying to do. And you can see there, we are getting a much better look than we did in Lightroom. And you can move the image around. So let's just go back to this one. And See how I can straighten up that horizon here? I can't do that in Lightroom. And we'll just push that back a little bit. So you can see how this is what it looks like because I've overshot the corners. But if I go along to the next option here, which is actually the crop, and now you can see it gives me the option to crop this down. So I'm just going to have a look and see what we get here. So I'll push that right into about there somewhere. And this one coming to just about there. And this one down to something like that. And you can see now how the panorama is starting to take shape. Now, it has projected this much larger than we would expect it to. But as we bring that down, let's just have a look at this. So you can see now it's starting to look like a pano, and it's not as wide as all of this that I might have thought, well, I can include this, but that's just because I didn't want to include any further down here. So anyway, let's just go to next, and that's now cropped that down. You can see what this looks like. It is actually quite straight, level, and there's no particular aberrations in this image. Now, obviously you can crop it and change a few other things as well. If you look over here, you can see the pixel dimension. So it's 8,685 wide by 6,300 high. So it's not your classic panorama shape, but that doesn't matter. It's still very dense in pixels, and I may actually be able to crop that down a bit lower at the bottom. So to do that, I just click on the back button here, get that back into view, and I can just pull that down a little bit. Somewhere, let's just say I go to about there, and click next. And what I've done there is I've actually changed the height. Now I don't have to do that here in this software. I can do that back in Lightroom or whatever, and I'd probably do that. But what we do now is, if I'm happy with that, which I am, we go to export to disk. Hang on, I'm going to change that from a JPEG to a TIFF, and export to disk, and that enables me to put that back where I had it there before, and we end up with an image. And after a fair bit of editing, this is what it looks like. Now, I'm not going to go through the editing of this image, but you can see what it looks like here. I've brought that image back into Photoshop actually and done a fair bit of work on the sky, bit of work on the foreground, but the actual composition is exactly the same as how it came out of Microsoft Image Composite Editor, ICE for short. All right, so let's have a look at a second example. This is at exactly the same location, a little bit different orientation. So I've got this in portrait mode. You can see my settings are pretty much the same as the other one, but I shot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now let's just have a look at these. I'll try and stitch these in Lightroom. So I've got them highlighted. I've got my edits over here, which are pretty standard for what I would do. Okay, you can see the images there. Right click, photo merge, panorama. And let's just see what Lightroom does with these. All right, now that's not too bad. That's in spherical. A little bit of a warpy horizon there, but not too bad. Cylindrical, let's see what that does. Yeah, that's stretching the top more than I would like. Perspective, unable to merge. So spherical isn't too bad, and I could probably recover that. So this one is looking reasonably okay in Lightroom. But what I'm going to do, because that's only a small image, it's a bit hard to see, I'll just cancel that. I'm going to export these as TIFFs one more time and put them into ICE. So export, TIFF files, export, and let's have a look at those. And here we are back in the Image Composite Editor, new panorama. Click on that, and it's going to ask me where I want to get them from. And I will say here, and open. And there they are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 images. Let's just click on the next button, and that will align and composite the images. And let's see what we get here. All right, now that's come up pretty good. That's the spherical projection option, which is pretty much the same as what Lightroom would do. Let's try a few of these other ones and just see what we get. So you can see what all of these different ones do, and it's just simply a matter of going through those and working out which one looks the best. But there's something I want to show you here in a minute that I don't like in this. Most of these projections are looking pretty good as far as the level horizon, etc. But let's just go back to this one. I find this this Mercator to be quite good on most occasions. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select that, but actually the other thing I can do in here is level that horizon this way a little bit. Now, if you want to change the perspective, you can go like so. And this is something that I love about this. It's very similar to what you can do in PTGUI. Now, PTGUI is a reasonably expensive, dedicated panorama stitching software, which works brilliantly, and it has a few more features than this, but it's expensive for a lot of people who don't want to spend the money, especially the Pro version, which is better, but it's a couple of $100 more than the standard version. And as you can see here, this is looking okay. So I'm just going to go to the next tab here. I'm going to then just crop this in, just roughly here, just for illustration purposes. Let's just go to about there. Now, there's something here that I don't like, and I'm going to just point that out to you in one moment. So that looks pretty good. That's cropped in. Let's just go to the next. And you can see there I've got 9,142 pixels wide by 5,384 high. Now that's a nice big pixel density. But the thing, have a look at this vignette here. Now that is annoying. And you will find when you go to edit this image, that is difficult to get rid of, especially when you start stretching and pushing this sky, which I tend to do a little bit with my editing. And when you try and get rid of that, it is a bit of a pain. So I want to show you one way using Lightroom to get rid of this vignette. Now the vignette is caused by the edges of the lens where you get darker around the frame, especially when you stop down to f1.8 or perhaps f2.2, which is what these images were shot at. So I'm going to exit this and go back to Lightroom and just show you my tip. So let's get out of there, discard that, open up Lightroom, and here we are in Lightroom. So I just want to go back here to the original image, and you can see all my adjustments, but you can sort of see if you look at this image, it's quite dark around the edges. And that is the natural vignette that you will get with just about any wide angle lens, especially shot at a pretty wide open aperture. This is f2.2. Let's go down to the lens correction tab and click on the manual. So normally it looks like that, but let's click on manual. Now what I'm going to do here is go down to the vignetting tab and push that across to about plus 50 odd, and the midpoint, let's have a look at that. Push that back to 0. Now you can see what that has actually done. It's lightened up the sky considerably, but it's got rid of a lot of that vignette. So let's just go back up to the top, and yep, everything else looks good. So what I'm going to do is copy the settings across to all the images. To do that, I'm going to hold Shift and click, and they are all selected. Now I press my sync button here and press sync, check all, and synchronize. Now all of these images have that setting applied, far less vignette. So let's try exporting those. So I'll go export. Once again, I'll go down, TIFF file, in this case, put it into my selected location, and let's come back. Once again, I'm here in Image Composite Editor, New Panorama, and I'm going to go back to the folder where I put those. So I've called that Silo 3 Part 2, less vignette. Funny way that I've actually labeled that, but anyway, let's put all of those in. Press open, and there they are, and I just click along that next button up the top here. It's aligning images, compositing images, and I'm hoping that what we get is an image with far less vignetting. So let's go to that Mercator selection again. Looking pretty good. Straighten up that horizon, the fraction. Yeah, that looks good. All right, let's go to the next tab. And this is where, and as you can see now, there's only a very slight amount of vignette there. So this is better. And so this is one of the tricks that I've learned along the journey. There are tools in all of these pieces of software to help us with the various adjustments that we need to make. So let's just click on next. And yeah, if you look at that, far less vignetting here, that's where it was, right down there, than we had previously. Apart from that, the image is identical. And I think this is something that I learned. I went through ages of trying to work out how to fix these black vertical lines that you often find. Sometimes you'll get these black lines in a multiple amount, one there, and one there, or something like that. And they are a real pain in the backside to actually edit out later on. So this is something that I've found. So in Lightroom, without going to too much trouble, you can often alleviate that. Now, this is helped by shooting with a big overlap so that the vignette is sort of swallowed up between the frames in the next image. But that's one of the methods I've been using with quite a bit of success. Now, my last example is this image which I shot recently, and this is made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 shots down the bottom here, which are shot with a Nikon Z6 Mark II Astro modified with a Viltrox 16mm f1.8. Now, I've shot this at f2.8, 15 seconds at ISO 4000. Now, I want to show you what happens if I try to stitch this in Lightroom. So let's just select all of those, right click, photo merge, panorama. Okay, so it's looking reasonably okay on spherical, cylindrical, too high, perspective, doesn't want to look at it. So let's just go back to this spherical. Now, I will merge this just to show you it's not quite right, and I want to show you exactly why it's not right. But to do that, I need to show it bigger, because I want to explain a couple of things that happen often with Lightroom and Photoshop because they're using the wrong projection mode. So let's just have a look at that. So here is what we've got. Now, obviously it's crooked, but that's not my major issue with this. My major issue is the shape of the Milky Way. It's just stretched across the top here, and I think it's stretched too much for my liking. See all those stars? They're stretching across the top, and let's just take it back a little bit. So you can see there, down the bottom it's not too bad, but at the top, Lightroom tends to do this quite a lot. So what I'm looking for is a projection mode that doesn't do that. Now, Lightroom doesn't appear to have one. I can try and straighten this up and crop it in and get rid of some of that, which I would do, and you could probably escape with a reasonable image out of this. But what I've found in the past, a better way is probably to go back and try it in some other stitching software. So I'll do the same thing. I'm going to select those, export, and send that off as a TIFF file once again, and we will do that and come back. Now, I'm using this image composite editor just to illustrate. You can do the same thing in other stitching software, but as I said, this is free for any Windows user, so it's really, really handy. So I'm going to just click in there and try and find those files. And there we are. So I'm just going to open all of those up and click next. So you can see it's very quick. Okay, so you can see what's happened here. Now that's chosen spherical, which is pretty much the same projection as I had in Lightroom. Let's go to Mercator, which I think is a better projection. Once again, you can see here that there is an element of vignetting here. Let's just have a look at that. But I like the projection much better. It's not squashing everything at the top here, which was the main problem I had with Lightroom. So I'm not going to do a full edit here or anything, but I'm going to show you how I would do this. So let's have a look at the crop. Let's crop that down a little bit, like so. So you can see it's shot as a panorama, but there is a fair bit of cropping that has to go on to get this down to where it needs to be. So something along the lines of that probably. Click on next. Okay, so there's the projection that I'm getting here in Microsoft Ice, and it's not stretching the stars at the top here. There is a bit of vignetting, which I would fix by doing the same thing that I showed you on the previous example. So one thing I will say about these stitching programs is that they are different depending on how many projection options you are given. So Lightroom only has 3. Photoshop is difficult to manipulate. It's pretty much the same as Lightroom in this regard. So these other standalone panorama editing software are much, much better. So now I can show you after all of my edits, that image looks just like this. And there's a lot of editing in this picture, but it looks fantastic because I've stitched it in a piece of software that doesn't stretch all these stars at the top. And I'm very, very happy with that result. So the techniques I'm explaining to you today can be used on any panorama. This is an 18 shot pano, 2 rows of 9. And you can see this is not tracked, it's just on a standard tripod ball head. And you can see that beautiful bit of touch of aurora down there, Milky Way, rocks, ocean. It was an absolutely magnificent experience up there, standing there. But I shot this very, very quickly because time was running out, and just on a standard ball head. And I used the techniques to stitch and put this together as I've just previously showed you. Now, sometimes when we think of panoramas, we think of big, wide, expansive. This one is a vertical panorama, sometimes referred to as a vertorama, which is shot using these images. You can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And the stitching, they're shot in horizontal or landscape aspect ratio, one on top of the other. And when we do the stitching, which is exactly the same process as what I've just showed you, we end up with an image that looks like this. Wonderful. Once again, on a fixed tripod, not tracked, and just with a ball head. So the difficulty with a panorama like this is getting the image to go straight up without getting wobble side to side, because if you do that, you will end up with edges. You'll cut off the middle of your shot. But if you shoot wide enough, you've got room to crop in, which is what I did in this particular case. Now, I just want to remind you that sometimes when you stitch, especially in Lightroom, you will get wonky projections like this one here. And my solution to that is to find a panorama stitching software that gives you more projection options. I want to remind you also that you will lose corners when you stitch bigger and wider, expansive panoramas. So make sure you overshoot so that you can crop it back to whatever it is that you want in your image. And as you can see from these examples, they're overshot a long way so that I do have that cropping room. I did mention PT GUI earlier, and this is a great panorama stitching program, and you can see it is very powerful, but it is much more complex to use, and it takes a bit of getting used to if you don't use it very often, but it does a great job. But I would suggest, if you're very serious about panoramas, to get the Pro version, and the Pro version is expensive. Now, one thing I'd like to mention, if you're shooting daytime panoramas, it is a lot easier because there will be less vignetting in the frame. So you can see here I've got these 7 or 8 images of a seascape in good light, and there's hardly any vignetting in these shots, and of course it's just stitched very easily in Lightroom. I didn't need to go to a specialized stitching program to get this to work because the software in Lightroom can see quite clearly where to stitch each image. So here's another daytime panorama with no hint of any vignetting because of the light levels and the ability to stop down the aperture to get a much cleaner across the frame image. And of course, this is easy to shoot in comparison to nightscapes. And here's another shot, daytime, 16 shot, 2-row panorama. Almost possible to do handheld, except that this is a long exposure at 4 seconds, so I had to put it onto a tripod. And you can see here that these types of images stitch beautifully in Lightroom, and you don't have to go to all the hoops and jumping through of when you're shooting your Astro landscape panoramas. But it's just the nature of what we do. The low light settings of our cameras for our Astro shooting make stitching panoramas so much more difficult. Now, just before we finish on this section, I want to show you this image. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shots shot in portrait orientation, f2.5, 15 seconds, 20mm focal length, ISO 3200, standard adjustments, hardly any adjustments as you can see there. And this is the final result of our panorama stitching. And this was done in Lightroom. I didn't go anywhere else. And if I look at the crop, you can see there is a little bit of overlap there, which I've just cropped down to what I want. So how come this one worked well and some of the other ones I've showed you didn't? Well, I can guarantee you that the main reason is because it is well lit, and this is something that people don't understand. If there's a lot of darkness in your image, whether it be foreground or in the sky, Panorama stitching software will struggle. So have a look at the overlap amount. See where this rock, the point of the rock is there. The next image is just there. So that's way more than 50%. And I've done that deliberately. So I've only moved across a tiny little bit. There's probably about a 75% overlap on this. And it goes right across, and you can see I've hardly moved. That rock started here and now it's there. So if you want to be really certain of your stitching, do a very large overlap. That means you've got to shoot more images, but you will probably get better, more accurate stitching results. And as you can see here, and as I mentioned, having good lighting on your foreground in particular makes the stitching software, well, it can just see all of these outlines, the tree and the rocks and everything else, and it knows exactly where to put each image. And in the long run, that's exactly what we are asking the software to do. So it's just a couple more here. You can see because there is so much overlap, it doesn't really look like a panorama, but these images are indeed panoramas. And this one here, another vertical panorama, a vertorama. And it doesn't really look like a panorama, and that is probably one of the keys because there is so much overlap in this image. It's not covering an enormous amount of real estate, but I am getting much more detail into my shots. Well, I hope this video has helped you better understand the workflow to achieve great Astro landscape panoramas. I must also mention that when shooting panoramas on a star tracker, all of these things remain the same. However, the complexity level is magnified quite a bit due to the tripod base moving gradually as the star tracker follows the stars. And that means we need to continually keep adjusting the mount to keep things level. Oh, and also we have the slight problem of a blurry foreground due to the movement of the tracker. Well, that's a lesson for another day. And I'd be happy to chat further about any of this stuff in the comments section below. So until the next video, you have a wonderful week. I'll see you then.